Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to invite on stage for the high-level session His Excellency Dherar Belhoul Falasi, Mr. Paul Cruickshank, Mr. Fiyaz Mughal, I welcome you on stage for the high-level session. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Can everybody hear me? Well, thank you so much to our hosts today, Trends. We're all delighted to be here, and we really do have an all-star panel here after the coffee break, and so hopefully everybody's had a good coffee and we're ready to go. And without further ado, I would like to give the floor to His Excellency Dherar Belhoul Falasi for some observations. The topic of this panel is From Islamism to the Far Right. And so, without further ado, I hand it over to you.
Let's everybody sit. Oh, shit. Let everybody sit down, you know. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Saeed, may I say, I would like to speak in English, but I'm mandated to speak in Arabic because of my position. So, do you have? Yeah, I think we have to get you ahead. Okay.
Thank you. Shukran. Thank you.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. في البداية أنا أعتقد قبل ما نبتدي في موضوع الإخوان المسلمين والإرهاب وهذا لازم نعرف بعض الأشياء. مصطلح اللي دائما هم يستخدمونه الإخوان المسلمين، أنا أعتقد أن هذا فيه نوع من العنصرية ونوع من التمييز، لأن هل هم المسلمين والبقية غير مسلمين؟ هاي نقطة مهمة أنه يجب أن تعريفها، لأنهم دائما يتكلمون أي حد غير الإخوان المسلمين فيوصف دائما بأنه بالتكفيريين أو أي شيء، لكن المسلمين هم في نظرهم فقط من ينتمي للإخوان المسلمين، فهذا التعريف أنا في اعتقادي أنه نوعا ما عنصري ويبث للكراهية. الجزء الثاني أنا أعتقد أنهم عندهم مشكلة، وهو أن 80 سنة أنا كتبت وهم في الخفاء ومحاولة أن إظهار المظلومية وإظهار أنهم الأفكار الثورية والتحريضية ولكن أن بعد 80 سنة، وأنا أعطي بالمثال ما حدث في مصر، فشلوا فشل ذريع. كنا نتوقع أنا بالمناسبة لي أنا كنت حاط أن لن يتجاوزوا السنتين، ولكن هم خيبوا ظني في خلال سنة انهار النظام هذا يدل على فشلهم وأنهم غير قادرين على إدارة الأمور. ويمكن الجزء الأهم واللي أنا أحب أتكلم فيه أعتقد مهم هو دورهم الآن في استغلال يمكن الشعوب العربية عاطفيين أكثر نحن، فهم استغلال المواقف اللي تواجههم. ناخذ على سبيل المثال غزة، فتجدهم هم أكثر ناس متصدرين للموقف، ليس أن نحن أحد مقصر ولا شيء، ولكن هم بهدف استغلال هذه القضية وكسب أكثر مبلغ ممكن يطلعون منه. على سبيل المثال إذا دخلنا على موضوع استغلالهم للمقاطعة، إذا تفكر فيها استغلالهم للمقاطعة، على سبيل المثال قال لك أنا ما أبغى يقول لك، قالوا سووا حملتهم اللي هي مال كوكاكولا، لا تستخدم هذه داعمة لإسرائيل، وفي المقابل في بديل، والبديل شو هي؟ عبارة عن إحدى شركاتهم، فهي عبارة عن تحويل الإيراد من هنا إلى هم. الآن والفترة الأخيرة اللي هم شغالين عليه، وأعتقد جزء مهم أن نحن ننتبه له، وهو الجامعات، وهم لهم وجود كبير في بريطانيا ويمكن في الكويت. وأخوي الأخ محمد أكد على هذا الموضوع. في الكويت البعثات اللي رايحة والحكومة مختارت لنا للجامعات وجامعات مرموقة، يتم التواصل معهم على أساس أن هذه الجامعة داعمة للإبادة، داعمة لما يحدث في غزة. نحن نقترح عليكم تروحون جامعة ثانية، والجامعة هاي يعني ليست بالمرموقة اللي الدولة جالسة تصرف على محتاجة، أقل منها، ولكن هم لهم أسهم فيها ولهم نسبة فيها وهم مؤسسينها. فأنت عبارة جالس تحول الدخل بطريقة أو ثانية. أنا أعتقد ما حدث في الإمارات، ويمكن وجود نظام، وأنا سعيد أني أنا واحد من اللي كنا في اللجنة ورئيس اللجنة اللي طبقت النظام، تنظيم التبرعات، قانون تنظيم التبرعات. أعتقد هذا القانون مثالي جدا، وهذا هو اللي جات لنا، ويمكن خلينا نقوله بالعامية، هذا هو يمكن كان المسمار الأخير في نعشهم في دولة الإمارات، واللي بحد كبير منهم يمكن هم لعبتهم في عملية التبرعات. وعملية التبرعات بالنسبة لهم، اللي احنا يمكن اللي حاضر السيشن الأولي كانت سنة التالية راوت المبالغ وراوتنا حجم المبالغ. إذا نحن نتكلم عن فرنسا وأوروبا بال10 مليون يورو، أنت إذا تحسب كم مرة 10 مليون يورو في السنة طلعت لهم، فأعتقد المبالغ بتكون خيالية. كمنظمات مجتمع مدني هم لهم علاقة كبيرة في المنظمات، وهذه يمكن تنظيمها عمل صعب. وأيضا لهذا السبب أن هذا وجود المنظمات والجمعيات الخيرية في الإمارات منظمة، فهم خسروا مبلغ كبير، والآن خسروا يمكن المبلغ الأكبر. ويمكن كنت أتكلم مع الأخ محمد على أن أنا سميت البقرة الحلوب. في الكويت كان البنك عندهم، ما أبغى أقول الاسم، فكانوا هم يديرونه من مجلس الإدارة إلى حتى الفراش، كل من الإخوان المسلمين. ولكن الحكومة في دولة الكويت تمكنت من تغيير مجلس الإدارة وحالة البعض للتقاعد وتغيير النظام بالكامل، وأصبح هذا أيضا نحن نفكر. أنا في اعتقادي إذا أنت تبغي تحارب الإخوان المسلمين أو الجماعات التطرفية، يجب أن تنجح في تجفيف منابع الدخل لديهم، لأن أعتقد منابع الدخل لديهم هي المفك أو المحك اللي هم مركزين عليه. إذا لم تتوفر المادة فلن تقوم لهم قائمة. الآن هم مصدرهم، نحن لازم نعرف بصراحة مصدرهم وين؟ مصدرهم أوروبا، ويمكن المصدر الوحيد مع احترامي هذا بريطانيا، مستغلين استغلال كبير، لدرجة أن هناك عندهم مسوي لك مثل كوميتي، واللجنة مسمينها الصوت العربي والإسلامي، لتوجيه الناخبين منو اللي بيدخل البرلمان حتى يكون لهم تأثير على البرلمان ولهم لوبي في البرلمان. فأصبح اللوبي، خلينا نقول العربي الإسلامي أو اللوبي الإخواني، ولأن هنا لازم نكون متأكدين هم الإخوان ليسوا بس فقط عرب، فإلهم فروع وامتدادات ثانية. ولهذا أنا قلت الإخوان خلينا نقول هم الأم الولادة اللي من تحتها طلع كل التنظيمات. أنا مع احترامي للجميع ما في ولد يعني مو بعاق طلع منها. إذا بتشوف السروريين من الإخوان، إذا بتشوف الجهاديين من الإخوان، إذا بتشوف القاعدة من الإخوان أصلاً، إذا بتشوف داعش من الإخوان. فرأس البلاء والشر في المجتمع العربي والإسلامي أعتقد الإخوان المسلمين. وللأسف نحن نتمنى من أوروبا أن تبدأ الحرب عليهم، لأنهم خلينا نقول أساس البلاء. فإذا أنت تخلصت من العنصر المادي منهم، فلن يستطيعوا يتحركوا. أنا أعتقد أن العنصر المادي وتجفيف منابع دخلهم، وإذا أنت أدركت من وين جابوا هاي الفلوس، وأعتقد هذا من أين لك هذا في الآن يجب أن يتم تطبيقه، يمكن في أوروبا وبريطانيا بالذات، لأنهم الآن أصبح المرتع الأخير لهم أوروبا، خاصة بريطانيا. ألمانيا بدأت تتحرك ضدهم، فرنسا بدأت تتحرك، ويجب على بريطانيا أن تتصرف. أنا أحب أذكر الموقف الحملة اللي سووها على الإمارات، لأن سكروا المسجد اللي في دبلن أعتقد. المسجد أغلق ليش؟ لأنه هم الشيخ حمدان الله يرحمه سوى المسجد هذا للمجتمع، ولكن ما حصل أنهم سيطروا وركبوا على هذا وأخذوا المسجد هذا منبر لهم. الإمارات تحركت وأغلقت وأعادت تنظيم الموضوع. عندما أغلق الحملة اللي استوت على الإمارات حملة عشواء، أن الإمارات هي من تسعى لمحاربة الإسلام، ولكن الإمارات لا تسعى لمحاربة الإسلام، لكن تسعى خلينا نقول تنظيف الإسلام من بقايا الإخوان المسلمين. مرة ثانية وأخيرة وأكرر أن إذا أردنا أن نحاربهم فيجب أن نحاربهم عن طريق تجفيف منابع دخلهم، لأن إذا نجحنا في هذا الشيء مثل ما نجحنا في الإمارات، نجحنا في أي منطقة ثانية، أعتقد ستكون نهايتهم، وإن شاء الله تكون نهايتهم قريبة. وشكرا.
So we've had a consistent theme so far today, and this was also from Senator Nathalie Goulet and His Excellency Dherar Falasi, who are saying, follow the money when it comes to this problem of Islamist extremism that we've been describing. Follow the money. What His Excellency was saying, that when you do follow the money, quite a lot of the money originates in the UK. So Liam Fox, you've been a member of several cabinets as Defence Secretary, as Trade Minister and other positions. How do you deal with this problem from a UK perspective?
First of all, you have to call it what it is. And I don't want to go back to make the same points that I was making earlier, but you have to recognize that in a Western liberal democracy, if you try to be too tolerant, you can actually allow the intolerant to overcome you and win the argument. And we have to really get ourselves ready for some fairly unpleasant choices that we would rather not have to make, and recognize that the danger is not just to our society and undermining our own values, but it's exporting those views to places where they may destabilize our allies and put our own security at risk. And we have to recognize that this is part of its ideology does not recognize borders. We governments live in a world where we look at nice organized maps and we think that's how the world really is. That's not how terrorists, it's not how ideologues view the world. They see a world where things are very different. That's the mindset we need to get into. We have to, in defending against it, yes, follow the money. That's obviously very key, but there are other things as well. You need to call out the ideology. This is a battle of ideologies, and we need to win the battle of ideologies, and we've got to call them out for what they are. I actually have a problem with the term Muslim Brotherhood because it implies it's something to do with Islam, which it isn't. We should call it the so-called Muslim Brotherhood, because otherwise, if you allow religion to have the pronoun, it gives pretensions of some religious implications which aren't there. These are hardline ideologues who detest our way of life, detest our values, detest our systems of government, and will bring them down, all of them, if they get the opportunity. So we need to call that out. And that also requires religious leaders, not just political leaders, to be unequivocal in their language in denouncing these people at every opportunity. And those who don't, we have to assume are in some way sympathetic with their objectives. But there's another whole element to this. If you're going to do it, not only do you have to tackle the money and you have to tackle the ideology, you need to tackle the problems that create an audience for these groups. And they will draw, as many revolutionary and ideological groups do, from the disaffected, from the disillusioned, the economically excluded, the uneducated. We need to deal with all of those things, and you need to deal with that in a regional as well as a more global context. In the United Kingdom, when we had the problems that we had in Northern Ireland, and we had religious extremists, or so-called religious extremists, in a long-standing problem in Northern Ireland, the answer was to build a bigger middle class. Because when you gave people something to lose, they were much more circumspect about the political choices they made. People who've got nothing to lose will gamble with it. People who've got something to lose will think much more carefully about the type of political affiliations that they have. And that's, in this region, we've got to create more people with something to lose. That's what the organization that I chair, the Abraham Accords Prosperity Group, is about. It's about how do you bring to a new generation, the next generation, opportunity and hope and dignity, because together they provide the trust and the cooperation which will act as a major barrier to the recruitment of terrorist groups from especially these young men. And we've got to give them a different future than we have. And we have to also remember, and the word has been used a lot, peace. Peace is not just the absence of conflict. Peace is something much more. It requires people to have opportunity. It requires people to be treated with dignity. It requires people to have ideas of tolerance. And I think that if you look in this region, you've got some very good examples of where people have moved from tolerance to peaceful coexistence, and are on their way to mutual respect, which is ultimately one of the things that you have to have. And so the terminologies we have are really important. So yes, tackle the money, understand that it's an ideological threat to us all, but deny the men of violence and of political extremism, deny them the recruiting grounds by making sure that you offer prosperity and hope to the next generation in a way that has been too much denied in the past, because we are all shaped by our history. But in this region, too many young people are prisoners of their history, and we've got to help them escape from that.
Fiyaz, Mughal, to bring you into the conversation, you're the driving force behind Tel Mama, which has done so much to tackle Islamophobia and violence against Muslims in the United Kingdom. You've had a front row seat in how particular extremist groups, in a UK perspective, manipulate hot button issues for their own agendas. Anger people might feel about British foreign policy or things that are going on in the world, which are twisted and distorted and used for the agendas of these groups. Can you elaborate on that from your first-hand experience in the UK?
Yeah, thank you. I hope you can all hear me. Let me just phrase this and put this back on. So the history of Muslim Brotherhood groups in the UK has been one which has been ebbing and flowing, changing for the last 35, 40 years. Let's not forget that a lot of the people from Muslim Brotherhood groups that ended up in the UK ended up from the 1980s onwards, as they were targeted by governments from Libya, Tunisia, and across North Africa and in the Middle East. When they were targeted in terms of prosecution or being brought to justice, many of these individuals fled and sought asylum. Many of them sought asylum in Germany as Muslim Brotherhood activists and Muslim Brotherhood leaders, and in the United Kingdom. So they ended up very much in Germany and the United Kingdom as two centers of engagement and influence. And I'm old enough to remember how in the mid-1980s, during the crisis in Israel and Palestine, and during the difficult periods there of the conflict that started in the Middle East around the mid-80s was when things really started to heat up. that there was lots of promotional material produced by these activists from Muslim Brotherhood countries that had now settled and got asylum in the United Kingdom, for example, where these leaflets were being circulated in mosque, where they were using the Palestinian issue. So a lot of people have talked about them using international foreign policy issues. That's precisely one of the key campaigning things they do, and they sadly do well. They use international issues and campaign. So they use the Palestinian issue. That drew in members of the Pakistani and the Bangladeshi community, young generation at that time, into the sphere of the Palestinian issue. And so a lot of these groups raised a lot of money during the mid-80s, and they then started, because they were highly active, to take over leadership of mosques, which were predominantly led by older Pakistani and Bangladeshi males who were not very active. But these Muslim Brotherhood activists were determined, highly active, and driven. And we can put the seed of that, as the Sheikh very honorably said, we can put the seed of that within the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom has been a key exporter of the most violent form of extremism that we have seen in the Middle East. Let's be clear about that. We have nothing to be proud of in the United Kingdom because we have produced some of the worst extremists that have impacted on you in the Middle East. They are the most violent. Let's cut to the chase. They're the most violent. You look at the so-called Beatles in ISIS, they were from the United Kingdom. I can give you chapter and list of the most violent individuals against us Muslims in the Middle East have come from Britain. So Britain has a fundamental problem, and that problem is getting worse. Let's cut to the chase. I'll tell you why it's getting worse. So, in the mid-1980s and 1990s, they used the Iraq wars to mobilize more people towards their view that Muslims are under threat, that you need to come to us as groups and we can defend you. So they used the Iraq war. And in 2003, one of the greatest mobilizing groups to get non-Muslims onto the street against the Iraq war, I was against the Iraq war, but these groups, these Muslim Brotherhood activists and groups, actually put their placards to such a degree in the 2003 demonstrations in London, where there were 1.5 million people, that I suddenly realized, who are these groups? And I realized now, 15, 20, 30 years later, that they were Muslim Brotherhood-led groups. Where did the money come from? They were producing thousands of placards in the 2003 demonstration against the war in Iraq. So these people are using key active issues in the Middle East. Now let me come back to the concern I have. And I'll come to also far-right extremist groups, because there's a problem here that is growing, and it's growing significantly in Europe. So let me come back to this issue. I've worked many years under conservative governments which were very good to tackle anti-Muslim hatred. I actively monitored with my colleague here over 15 years anti-Muslim hatred in the UK, and it got worse, and it has gotten worse. That's a fact. We can measure it. And it's gotten worse. And the Conservative government wanted to do something about this. So Liam and his colleagues really wanted to challenge the anti-Muslim hatred, and they were determined to do so. And I honor them, the Conservative government, and I'm not trying to be political, but I have to be truthful about the work they did challenging anti-Muslim hatred through groups like us. Now, when we challenge anti-Muslim hatred, it's important because we're all majority Muslims in this group, and we are saying that the Islam of the Muslim Brotherhood is not our Islam. As so many people have said on this stand, it is a political form of mind control. It is a form of controlling your rights where you do not have a right in your future. That is the Muslim Brotherhood, and that is these groups. It is not the Islam of personal choice, of link with God. It is not the Islam of openness and tolerance we see here in this country. So, even with David Cameron, the Right Honourable David Cameron, who tried to do something about the issue, unfortunately, issues around Brexit led to him leaving. The issue of the Muslim Brotherhood dropped. And whilst the Conservatives were focused on such issues, this current Labour government have literally no clue, no idea who they're dealing with within parts of Muslim communities. And so the door has opened for Muslim Brotherhood groups to start to enter government again. They are entering government, they are influencing this Labour government, they are influencing where the direction of flow is going, and they are listening to the wrong people. So the influence of the Muslim Brotherhood groups, and I will also say they're useful idiots, the group around them that don't know who these groups are, that go and get government contacts with them, is grown exponentially since this government in the United Kingdom has taken root. Now, there are two other problems. Let me add, if I may, two other problems. We know that Donald Trump, and I'm not going to get political on Donald Trump, but I'm going to just state the fact. We know that Donald Trump is very much pushing social media companies to be at the forefront of doing less to inhibit speech. That's where the direction of travel is going. He is saying that actually there should be free speech on platforms. If you look at the United Kingdom, just a few days ago, 110,000 people followed an individual who has criminal convictions, who led a major demonstration, of which within that demonstration, there were people who said there is no space for Muslims in Europe. Okay, and that's a problem. Because that means people like me who are willing to challenge the Muslim Brotherhood. Those people in the demonstration were saying in London, 110,000 turned up, not all of them are racist, not all of them are Islamophobes, some of them certainly were. Now, these people are getting a platform on social media and they are reinforcing the Muslim Brotherhood narrative that the West is against Islam. This is the Muslim Brotherhood narrative. The West is against Islam. The West doesn't like us as Muslims. Come to us, we will defend you. And yet, the policy of allowing any debate, which is being pushed through by the Republicans in the US, is influencing social policy in the UK and allowing far-right groups to promote the view that Muslims are a problem, not the Muslim Brotherhood, but Muslims are the problem. So we are having both sides, the Muslim Brotherhood groups and extreme anti-Muslim groups, growing in significant numbers. I'll leave you with this one fact. So they're becoming highly polarized. Now, I think we can all agree the nature of this country's values, the nature of us sitting in this room, is that there's no clash of civilization between us. That we can live peacefully in tolerance and understanding and mutual recognition as Muslims, non-Muslims, Christians, Jews, etc. That is the core value of us. So if we are to tackle these individuals, we are in a much more complex environment. And I leave you with this. Before the Gaza war, again, Gaza has been a major contributor to Muslim Brotherhood group support, influence, money. We all feel for what's happening in Gaza. We all feel passionately about what's happening in Gaza. But we don't want these groups creating the views that they are promoting, which is, again, a very dangerous narrative around clash between faiths. We don't want that. But let me leave you with this. Before Gaza, we looked at, my colleague and I looked at 4 groups which were affiliated with Muslim Brotherhood groups. They had a total social media content of 200,000 followers. Today, that is over 2.5 million followers. They are based in the United Kingdom. These groups are based in the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom has lost control in the fight on extremism. Let me be clear, I'm dealing with this for 25, 30 years. The United Kingdom is the major financier of Muslim Brotherhood activities today. Anyone who tells you different, let me tell you, this information I know, but has also been said by a very esteemed politician in the United Kingdom I met, who I will name. I hold him in very high regard. He's a member of the Conservative Party, Tom Tugendhat MP, sat with me in a meeting, previously a cabinet member in previous Conservative government, and said, do you know, Fiyaz, London is the center financier for Muslim Brotherhood activities? And I said, I know. So we have a problem. We need your support. There are fewer and fewer British Muslims like me. I can only count 3 of us who are willing to speak against these groups. There are fewer and fewer of us because people are being targeted, social media attacks on them, attacks on their homes. We need your help in this battle because this battle is coming back to you in a big way. And so we need more Muslims to speak and more Muslims to be active out there so it doesn't land back here. Thank you.
And all of this is now playing out in an age where, with a smartphone, with access to social media, with access to videos from different platforms like TikTok or all the others available, they can get this message out, as you were saying, to so many more people in so many different ways and so quickly, and create these echo chambers. Very, very difficult to kind of police, very difficult to track all of this. And it happens at the speed of electrons, right? And as you say, it goes far beyond UK borders. I mean, there was a problem in the 1990s that people talked about Londonistan. Well, this is sort of Londonistan 3.0 in a social media age, and which has reverberations and implications back in this region as well because of what's being put out there. You've all thought leaders in this space, you've all thought a lot about it. How do you begin to grapple with this problem, sir?
I think Muslim I think Muslim Brotherhood, they are the best, as you said, in using any case happen for their benefit. They don't mind for whatever, anything, but since it is for their benefit, they will use it. I'll give you an example from now, what's happening in there. If you measure what is the relationship between Muslim Brotherhood as extremists and partnering with LGBTQ, which is, in fact, they were against, but they will use anything for their benefit. Second thing, as you said, I think, and I wrote about it, they had used, they canceled this one before everybody. There is a theory which is called character assassination, and they have used it well at that time in 2011, 2010. They use it to any, especially here I am talking, against anybody. And I am one of them who had used it. They had tried it. What they do is try to smear you. They don't mind for anything, but when they know, okay, listen, Paul is against us, so they start to ruin their reputation. And they have a huge number of followers, or let's say, I call them keyboard soldiers, which is in fact behind the keyboard they are heroes and everything. In fact, they are the most cowardest people I have seen, They will start ruining anybody against them. But well, they were successful on some. And they had forced some people to keep quiet. I said, that's it. I'm not going to fight them. I'm not going to defend them, say anything about them, because they're going to ruin my reputation. And they don't mind going after your children, your wife, and this has happened to everybody. So they are ruthless. We have to admit this. They are ruthless. They don't care about anything. They care only for themselves. So ready to ruin anybody who stands against them. That's why, again, I say I put the question, why they hate UAE and why they hate Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed especially. Because UAE had stand from day one against them. And I wrote once that UAE, and it was the barrier who stopped them, If you notice, when it reached UAE, it is stopped, and the effect for the other GCC countries started. You have the Saudi, then you have the Bahraini, then the Kuwaitis now. Everybody, and you have the Jordanian now also, plus Morocco. Where they are now, it is ruined country. This is their target. They ruin everything. An example is Libya. An example is Tunisia. Nothing is there, almost bankrupted, both of them. They don't care. Egypt, when they lost, Egypt was on the minus side. That's why everybody stand with it. And this is also an admission from what His Excellency said, President Sisi said. If the GCC country didn't stand with us and diverted the oil tanker, we will have a problem. But this is a proof that they are not willing to rule, and they cannot have the capacity to rule anything. They are ready to ruin anything, not rule anything. So if we were able, we should, give a hand to Britain to stand. And this is maybe from my last visit, which is a month ago in UK, and I spoke to so many people. They are really a lobby, a strong lobby now. As you said, they are a very strong lobby, and they're working from now, preparing for the next election. So they are ready to do anything, but they have their men or women in the parliament. So we have to fight it back. And this is the only way we can stop them. We have to expose them. And thanks God we have a few men here who can stand there against them. Thank you, Paul.
So Liam, what's your reaction to this?
I very largely agree with a lot of what's been said. Politically, you've had politicians on the right who are afraid of being labelled as racist or Islamophobic, and you've got politicians on the left who are afraid of losing electoral support by tackling these very groups. And the combination of that has been a toxic environment. So there are a number of things. Number one is the key message from the non-Islamic population in Britain has to be that this is not about Islam. The so-called Muslim Brotherhood are nothing to do with Islam. They're a highly ideological revolutionary group who have got very clear objectives, and they don't at any point correspond to the values that I hold or that traditionally are part of the UK. But then the second and the more important task, I would say, is recognizing they recruit from the Muslim population in Britain, which is largely a Pakistani and Bangladeshi community in Britain, and it tends to be very concentrated geographically. And what you therefore require are leaders from those communities. You do require it from the rest of the country, of course, but in particular from those communities to say, these people are not your friends. They are nothing to do with Islam, and unless you tackle them, life for you will get more difficult because there will be a backlash against the wrong people. And that is exactly the leadership for this needs to come from the religious and political leaders inside those communities. We need to empower them, if necessary, fund them to give those messages to the right people, and to recognize that the Muslim Brotherhood, so-called Muslim Brotherhood, and their acolytes, they sow hatred and division in those populations because that's how they recruit and make money. That's their business model. And we have to ensure that that's interrupted. And the best people to do that are those leaders from inside that Muslim population itself. They have more credibility. They better understand the communities within which they operate. And we need them to step up to the plate. Governments can legislate. Governments can deal with money. Governments can try to alter opinions. But until you deal with the problems inside those communities, then there's a limit to what governments can do with legislation or potential attitudinal changes.
And it's such an important point that if you look at the UK, the vast majority of British Muslims have no time for this sort of politicization of the religion, the Islamist Muslim Brotherhood. And obviously there's some courageous voices. We've heard some of them today, speaking out. And what Salim was saying about empowering the community, the very large, perhaps more silent majority. How do you do that? How do you, Fiyaz, how do you kind of give them the tools, give them the confidence to speak out?
This one. I think we have to define, as Your Excellency said, they are not the Muslim Brotherhood. They hijacked the Islam. This is, we have to define it. They are not a brother, they are created. In Islam, Al-Ikhwan is a brotherhood, but there is another thing I wrote, and they are creator. It is the same, Khawana. So they are hijacking the Islam. They are not supporting the Islam. They hijacked the Islam just right to their own goals, you know.
And language matters. Language really matters in this debate, which is why I made the point earlier. We must get away from using this phrase, religious extremists. They are not religious extremists. They are extremists who use religion as a cover or attempt to hijack it as a cover. We've got to get our terminology right, because when we talk in some of these terms, we actually aggravate rather than help the problem. And we must never use the phrase Muslim Brotherhood, because it instantly, to a population that doesn't understand the issues, suggests that this is primarily an act of a religiously motivated grouping. We've got to stop it. And that requires a lot of education, but it requires politicians in particular to not use these phrases.
Yes.
Never, ever, ever say religious extremists. Say extremists who use religion, because there is a massive difference in understanding between those two phrases.
Well, I mean, first of all, His Excellency and Salim, I totally agree with what you said. I just wanted to add a few other things onto this. Is, you know, if you look at the damage such groups have caused in Europe, the rise of the extreme far right, I'm not talking about people with right-wing views, that's political normal discourse. But if we're looking at the extreme far right, which are groups that say Muslims should not even be in Europe, the rise of those groups is directly the result of groups that we are talking about, like Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood, as His Excellency has said, are the root cause of the terrorism that has led to a lot of these far-right movements having something that they can use against everyday Muslims. The fracture in Europe and the United Kingdom is significant because of these groups. And innocent Muslims daily going about their lives are affected by comments, abuse, online abuse, harassment, assault. I know because we measure it every year. And when I started the work with my colleague in 2011, we had 600 cases reported nationally. This year, we are going to report over 15,000 cases reported just to our NGO, 15,000 cases. You look at the percentage rise that's happened. So let's talk about the impact. The impact is significant. Now, how do we tackle this? Well, I would suggest that the UAE has a significant role in explaining to ministers in the United Kingdom that the charity law and the charity structures within the United Kingdom need to change. The Senator Natalie Goulet was up here before, and this is how let me explain how this all ties in really well. She mentioned a group called FEMISO, if you remember earlier, FEMISO, which gets money from the European Union. Well, FEMISO have just opened a branch in the United Kingdom just a year ago. So we are now importing French organizations, and we are also exporting to France, something that I had said to French senators 5 years ago, that between France and Britain, we've got a discourse and exchange of groups and ideas happening right across, of which nobody is looking at. So the UAE can say to Britain, why are these groups getting charity status? Why are they getting charity registration? Because if they raise money, they can also claim money from the taxpayer. Back to what Natalie was saying. So pressure on charity existing laws need to be put. Second of all, You have a great digital literacy center. We've just seen a great project out there around mapping such groups. I think it is important for each and every one of us as Muslims trying to live a peaceful, coexistent, harmonious life with people of other faith and none, that we become digital ambassadors to, and this is really important, we take ownership of our pure religious beliefs of kindness, humanity, and dignity in Islam, and we challenge these people where we find them online. Challenge them. Don't leave them talking openly in the public digital space. Third thing, the UAE can continue to put pressure on the UK for more financial stringent mechanisms to be put into place so we can start to see where is the money coming from and better financial connections between European Union and the United Kingdom going forward. Unfortunately, the break between United Kingdom and Europe because of Brexit has also slowed down some of that, and we are in catch-up phase over time. But certainly the financial center of these groups is the United Kingdom, so more pressure can be put. Last but not least, let me just tell you what else can be done. You are a beacon. For me, in the Muslim world, in the Muslim majority countries, I'm looking at you as a beacon. You've got the Abrahamic centers, tolerance center, you have a structure which says we are open to the world, you have a system which has dignity for men and women. You are a leading player in shaping minds of young Muslims. Please become more active, robust, more forward-facing in your engagement with young Muslims in Europe, because many of them are lost in their direction. Seriously. They are lost in their religious direction. Their leadership in the imams don't speak their languages sometimes. I know we've got Imam Tawhidi here who's very good on social media. What I'm saying is we need people who are out there speaking to the youth, engaging with them in their language, bringing religion up from up here down to their level, and in a way which is the open Islam, which we all know, rather than the closed control, I won't even call it Islam, the closed control, restrictive, twisted mindset of these groups. Because the Islam they promote is not the Islam I know. I can't even recognize some of it. It's not even Islam. It's a twisted, controlled form of trying to take your future away from you, and we need to make that very clear. So last thing, we all as individuals can be ambassadors to challenge them where we find them online. Challenge them. I know it's difficult. I know it may cost us reputationally. God, they've gone after me regularly. I'm some kind of kafir, I'm some kind of unbeliever because I challenge them. Well, I don't care. My skin is a bit thick, but the Islam that His Excellency talked about is the Islam of openness, of open minds, not closed minds, and these people are very closed-minded.
Perhaps we could just have some concluding thoughts from the panelists, and perhaps just to conclude, what are the things that keep you up at night, and then what are the things that make you most hopeful?
Let me start with hopeful. I think the hopeful is here. UAE is the beacon, and from this beacon I can see in the Middle East some hope, and hope is coming. You can see it in Bahrain, you can see it in Qatar, you can see it in Saudi Arabia, and you can see it anywhere. Even in Syria, now everything is changing. But there is hope, but still the root cause of this is still there. I'll give an example. Some of those countries, I don't want to mention names in the Arab, they bothered us with the Gaza problem. Where are they yesterday, at least, when they're voting? They are not there. They didn't come to the UN. So let us say one thing, stop lying, and if you have the courage, go and say it. And I think UAE have the courage, They started the Ibrahim Accord. Nobody had the courage to do it. UAE have done it. And UAE now, if you noticed, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed Zayed, he went to Qatar, he went to everything, he gathered all the forces, together. There is a hope, and always we should have hope. But I think the hope starts from UAE, and UAE can lead this beacon to another. As you said, both of you said about that UAE can provide the assistance to UK and still provide the assistance to UK. Again, we'll come back to the source of money. If we were successful, we gonna finish them at all. And this is the hope that one day they will finish. Thank you.
What worries me most is the polarization that is occurring across the world. In 2009, I was sitting with Senator John McCain in his office in Washington, and I said to him then, I said, John, there's something I feel I have to tell you. He said, what? I said, it seems to me now there are people on both sides of the aisle in Washington who would rather see America fail than see their opponents succeed, which strikes me as deeply un-American. And that has got much worse. The tribalism, the polarization which has been fed and exacerbated by the rise of social media, so that people only have to listen to views to which they already agree and which become more and more extreme with every iteration. That's my fear. And my fear, along with that, is that moderates are abandoning the fight on social media. They find it so unpleasant that they would rather avoid it than counter it. And what we need is for people to recognize that, yes, social media is a risk, but it's also an opportunity. It's an opportunity for decent-minded people to counter it. And you know what? In the age of AI, we have the ability to do that on a massive scale. And we need to use our resources, including our financial resources, to fight that battle and take it. Because where young people are getting these ideas, where they're getting the information, is not through the mainstream media. It's not in the battles that we fight on the political level. It's through TikTok. It's through the social media channels that they use. We need to engage in that battle in those places, because there's no point in us talking to the wrong audience. We need to understand. We also need to recognize in Britain that if politically you want to just celebrate diversity but not celebrate commonality, then you don't get diversity, you get fragmentation and ghettoization. And that is a political realization that is way long overdue, but is still too scary for a lot of politicians to want to counter. And we need to take that argument out. What makes me optimistic? What makes me optimistic, actually, when, through all the Gaza situation, is the strategic patience of the governments here in the UAE and in Bahrain and in Morocco to recognize that the Abraham Accords are an investment in peace that is a generational program, not a short-term one, and they have not been commended enough and thanked enough publicly, internationally, for the strategic patience they have shown and the understanding of what this program actually means. And I think that I try to do it as often as I can, publicly, to say thank you, because you have shown that there is not a single issue in the Middle East. There are lots of issues, and they need all to be dealt with. And if you allow the Middle East to become a prisoner of a single issue, you will never be able to move forward. So I think the government here has been exemplary in the way that it has dealt with the politics of the region. But I think they could do a huge amount in concert with some of the groups we've talked about in the United Kingdom, of taking the battle of the moderates to the extremists and using the things that we most fear as the opportunities to redress that balance. The things that we fear the most are the things that can also be our greatest weapons if we've got the courage to take them up.
Yeah. Well said, Salim. And His Excellency well said on all of these matters. So I just want to add 2 or 3 just key points here. Please don't underestimate your power. Please don't underestimate your power, your individual power in changing hearts and minds online. Do not underestimate your capacity, because if we collectively do not get into this hearts and minds struggle, then what happens in Europe will hit your shores. And what happens here hits Europe's shores. We are so interlinked.
Yes.
We are so connected and bonded. Do not think we are just an island away and nothing's going to affect us. So globally, we are interconnected. It means that each one of us has a role in changing hearts and minds. Let me give you 2 other things. If we look at countries like Morocco and the UAE, as Salim said, the religious environment you find in these countries is so settling, is so open-minded and settling, that actually, if you compare it to other countries, it feels like chalk and cheese, very polarized ends. And so your role as a people, your role as a nation, your direction and leadership is fundamental in trying to influence other countries where they do not know where to start. As I said, the government in the United Kingdom is clueless because it is trying to keep its political base in certain constituencies by saying and doing nothing. But inaction is not the way we deal with this issue. Because for them, they need the votes. So we need to tell them, hold on, the people you engage with are not the Muslims you need to be engaging with here. And last but not least, so each one of us has a role. This is a battle for the 21st century for hearts and minds, because what comes out of it is the form of Islam for the future. Do we want an Islam where, for example, I spend quite a lot of time in Andalusia. Do we want an open-minded Islam in the 12th century which gave women's rights to all faiths, Jews, Christians, and Muslims? The openness that they showed then, which we can have an openness going forward? Or will we have an Islam shaped by these characters, which is divisive, conflictual, painful, and constantly in war? I know which one I want, and that is to respect other people and to be respected for who I am. Now, this is the battle we're fighting here. Each one of us has a role.
Can I just add exactly that, but there is one group that we've not really mentioned who have an especially important role in that, and that is women. Because you need to be making the case to a lot of these groups about where the problems arise. Let's face it, we don't have a problem with the Muslim sisterhood. We have a problem in a lot of these groupings where women are treated as second-class citizens. They're treated as the property of men. They have attitudes which women here would find absolutely repulsive, but these need to be challenged, because in societies where women are treated as equals, where women are given the same opportunities as men, where women are treated as equal citizens, you do not get the recruiting power that exists in some of these communities. So the women in this audience, you have a special role to play in liberating some of these groups in countries in Europe. And you should relish that challenge, because you hold the key to some of these very groups who need to be empowered, because they are the antidote to some of the extreme ideologies upon which the groups like the Muslim Brotherhood feast.
Well, thank you so much, all of you, for your very, very deep and important insights today. And I'm sure everyone would like to extend a round of applause for all of you.
Thank you.